So good evening. Once again, welcome back to Professor Academy's question paper analysis of UGC NET English, December 2021, Shift 1. And today we are going to discuss questions from 46 to 50. So 46, what might the speaker mean when he addresses time in a Shakespearean sonnet and declares that I will be true despite thy scythe and thee? Okay. So question from Shakespearean sonnet, and you have a speaker addressing time, and there is this line, I will be true despite thy scythe and thee. Then we have four statements. A, time preserves human life. B, with time comes change. C, time creates opportunities. D, time removes human life. Only two are correct. You have to eliminate two. Then let's go for the options. A and B only, in the sense time preserves life, with time comes change. So similar way, option B, A and C only, C, B and D only, D, C and D only. So before you choose the answer, spend some time on the question. So number one, time is personified here. That's very clear, right? And I would say you need not have read this particular Shakespearean sonnet. There's no need. So there is a clue in the question itself. I will be true. Okay, fine. The next word is a key, despite thy scythe and thee. So just choose despite is a negative word. So despite thy scythe and thee, I will be true. So there's a kind of a negative element in the context. All right. So if you know that, then go for the option where you have some negativity, right? Time preserves human life. With time comes change. Time creates opportunities. Time removes human life. So if you think, if you go with the D, then you can easily eliminate option A and B where there is no D, right? Then you will be left with only two options, C and D, where we have B and D and C and D. Now you have to choose either BD or CD. So that's the one. Even there are a lot of clues. If you know the meaning of the word scythe, S-C-Y-T-H-E, scythe, refers to an instrument or a tool for cutting paddy or other crops, right, during harvest season. So with that clue, I hope you can choose one, and let's go to the answer. Answer is C, B and D only. So B, with time comes change. Then D, time removes human life. So it's why, without reading this particular sonnet, you could have chosen this answer. Why? Because everything is there in the question itself. Number one, time is personified, right? Number two, there is a kind of a negative word, despite. Thy scythe. Scythe refers to a kind of a tool to cut crops. So it means time is personified as a reaper. A reaper wants who cut off crops when they are mature, right? So kind of a death. Time represents death here, or scythe represents death here. So reaper is one who collects lives. So if you have come to that conclusion, then it's very easy. Time removes human life. Fine. And with time comes change. Why you have to go for that option? Because the speaker says, I will be true. In the sense, I will be true even if time changes, right? So that's how you can go for the answer. So hereafter, you can always expect a question like this, because in recent times, UGC NET, they have changed the trend. In the sense, they give more emphasis on interpretation. The question, the aspirants' ability to interpret text. So you have to interpret on the spot. You will be given a line, a poem line, or a passage from a play. So today's class, that's what we are going to do. So first question is more to do with interpretation. Almost all the questions, what we are going to do, today, all the 5 questions have something to do with interpretation. Okay, so let's go. So particularly this line, I will be true despite thy scythe and thee. is taken from sonnet 123, right? So look at the first line of this sonnet. No, time, thou shalt not boast that I do change. So the first word itself is there. That time changes everything, but this speaker doesn't change. The speaker's love for the fair youth will be eternal, right? And the last couplet, this I do vow, and this shall ever be. I will be true despite thy scythe and thee. So despite you, the reaper, not death as a reaper, I will be, even death cannot, change my worshipping the fair youth, right? So how to develop this kind of interpretation? So hereafter you can definitely expect around 10 questions based on interpretation. You can expect a poem line, a poetic line, or a dramatic line, or even from novels. What you have to do, at least the broad outlook or broad understanding of the context. Then you can easily crack this question, right? If you know this, then it's actually a general question. So what is the context? We know Shakespeare, his sonnet sequence, 154 sonnets, and it is divided into groups. Sonnet 1 to 126 addressed to the fair youth. Then 127 to 152 addressed to the dark lady. Then the last two sonnets, 153 and 154, addresses or talks about the power of Cupid, right? So this is the context, and sonnet 123 is from the first category. 1 to 126, the given sonnet is actually 123. So it addresses the fair youth. So here is a speaker who urges this fair youth to get married, because the fair youth is not getting married. So there is someone who is asking him to get married so that he can produce offspring, so that these children will tell his name forever, right? So if you know this context, then you can easily answer that without reading that particular sonnet. Then get to know something about sonnets. The first edition of Shakespeare's sonnets was published in 1609. It was printed by Thomas Thorpe, Thorpe. And another curious thing about this first edition, it was dedicated to a mysterious person called Mr. W.H. Once it was asked as a question in a NET exam a few years ago. So to whom was this sonnet collection dedicated? Mr. W.H. And this is a mystery people try to solve even now. The identity of Mr. W.H. is a mystery. We don't know who this Mr. W.H. was. Sometimes scholars think Mr. W.H. and the fair youth in the sonnets are one and the same. Sometimes they think W.H. refers to Henry Risley, 3rd Earl of Southampton. Spelling Risley, pronunciation is Risley. It is pronounced Risley. Spelling W-R-I-O-T-H-E-S-L-E-Y, Risley. Then others say maybe it is William Herbert, 3rd Earl of Pembroke. But of these three, people always go for the middle one, because earlier Shakespeare dedicated his poetry collection, poetry, Venus and Adonais and The Rape of Lucrece. Both these works were dedicated to Henry Risley, 3rd Earl of Southampton. So he could have also dedicated this sonnet sequence to Henry Risley, but we will not know. So these are some of the possible candidates for Mr. W.H. So before we go to the next question, as I told you before, today it's all about interpretation. So next question, we have two questions based on this extract from Shakespeare's The Tempest. Spend some time, let's read. The solemn temples, the great globe itself, yeah, all which it inherit shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant faded, leave not a rack behind. We are such stuff as dreams are made on, and our little life is surrounded with a sleep. So, even in our earlier analysis of questions, I told you before, whenever you read a work, pay attention to, similes and metaphors. So here we have like this insubstantial pageant. So something is compared to insubstantial pageant. What is insubstantial? Something that you can't feel. That is in substance. There is no substance at all. If you connect that, that is also connected with the next line. As dreams, because dreams, they are just illusions. There is no stuff. It is not concrete. All right. Again, it is compared with the sleep. All right. So if you have this kind of idea, and if you know the context of this work, at least the broad understanding of the Tempest, pageant, what is pageant, or what is insubstantial? Sometimes you need not have read the line by line the text of Tempest, but if you have some understanding what is this pageant, or at least meaning of insubstantial, you can easily answer the following questions. So let's go. 47. This insubstantial pageant refers to option A, a non-real performance, B, enactment with a support structure, C, the destroyed Mother Earth, D, the shutdown of Globe Theatre. Right? So just think, substantial, where we discussed before, insubstantial, something that doesn't have any substance at all. It's not, if you can understand, then easy. Do you think the destroyed Mother Earth, why that's an odd option? Enactment with the support structure, I don't think so, or shutdown. So there is only one option that stands out. Option A, a non-real performance. Why? If you know the context, then this is a very easy question. Number one, we got the clue from the adjective used here, insubstantial, that has no substance. So it is non-real. Another, what is a pageant? Pageant refers to a performance. Even now we say beauty pageant. So it's a kind of a performance. And if you think of the Tempest, this is the context. In Act 4, Scene 1 of Tempest, Prospero gives this speech. And before this speech, what happened? Before this speech, we have this airy spirit Ariel. So Ariel put on a play. Not a play, it's a mask, M-A-S-Q-U-E. Mask is also called pageant, kind of a performance. To whom? To Prospero's daughter Miranda, and Miranda is going to marry Ferdinand. So for Ferdinand and Miranda, Ariel put on a performance, and in that performance, who are actors? Actors were all spirits, spirits who took the form of goddesses like Ceres or Iris or Juno, goddesses of marriage. So this is a very important speech by Prospero. This is an often quoted line. Our revels now are ended. Revels means merry-making or joy, because he just stopped the play or mask, M-A-S-Q-U-E. Why? Because Ariel gave a piece of information to Prospero. Prospero, Caliban is on the way to attack us. So he stopped this performance. So he said, our revels now are ended. These, our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits. They are not real. They are all spirits and are melted into air. So suddenly once Prospero says stop, everything vanishes into thin air and like the baseless fabric of this vision. So what you saw is just a vision. The cloud-capped towers, the gorgeous palaces, the solemn temples, the background of this mask, or the great globe itself. Yeah, all which it inherent shall dissolve. And like this insubstantial pageant. So it's only an illusion, what you saw. Faded, leave not a rack behind. So nothing is left here. So you go back, because I have some important duty to perform. So now he stops this mask put on by Ariel. Then he is going to confront Caliban, so who is coming with Trinculo and Stefano to attack Prospero. So at least the broad understanding of Tempest. Then you have some understanding of how to interpret particular adjective or particular noun. Then you need not worry about these types of questions. You can easily answer. For instance, since you know this context, next question, 48, is also from that passage. We are such stuff as dreams are made on means. So what is the meaning of this? As a student of literature, you should have some understanding. So you should be able to interpret lines. Simple. We are such stuff as dreams. So what is the meaning? Option A, human life is full of imaginary colors. Do you think so? B, our life is a text of what happened. C, there is no substance to human life. D, we are a bundle of past reality, right? The earlier question and this question is actually connected, right? Answer is very easy. C, there is no substance to human life. Life is nothing but a dream. That's all. So I don't think this is a tough question. So hereafter you will get questions like this, passages from drama, plays, novels, and poems. So you have to be ready, in the sense you have to train yourself or spend some time. You need not have read Tempest or even the sonnet, but read the lines again and again. Definitely will get a clue. So if you know how to interpret the word dream, then this is an easy question. Dream has no substance, then you go for it. Earlier, if you know the word pageant or insubstantial, even the earlier question, first question, if you know scythe or time, then these are all easy questions. We'll go to the next one, which is actually a bit tough. Okay. Who is the author of the essay? What isn't literature? What is not literature? Okay, this is an essay. We have 4 critics or thinkers here. Option A, E.D. Hirsch, Hirsch. Then B, Hans Georg Gadamer. C, Paul Ricoeur, Ricoeur, Ricoeur. Then D, Terry Eagleton. I know this is a tough question. Even it is tough to find where this question is from, this essay is from. So sometimes you have to go with the instinct, because we get toughest questions, right? This I would say is the toughest question, but we can eliminate one option if you know certain context. For instance, one option is odd here, Terry Eagleton, because Terry Eagleton is a Marxist, whereas they're all philosophers associated with a particular school of thought. And Terry Eagleton is actually known for an essay called What is Literature? And at least you know that you can eliminate one option. Then you are left with actually 3, right? So let's check out the answer. Answer is actually A, E.D. Hirsch, Hirsch, Jr. Then what is the context? Now, at least if we can't understand this time, then at least we know the context so that we can be prepared for the next exam. What is the context? What is the commonality between these 3 thinkers? They are all associated with a school of thought or a kind of a movement called a school of criticism called hermeneutics. Hermeneutics. What is hermeneutics? Hermeneutics refers to the study of interpretation. Simple. Earlier, the word meant the interpretation of the Bible, the scripture earlier. Now, extended meaning, the study of the interpretation of literary texts. So this is a separate school of thought, particularly focusing on interpretation of literary texts or interpretation in general. So we have philosophers and thinkers under this school of thought. We have Friedrich Schleiermacher, Schleiermacher, tough to pronounce, Schleiermacher. Okay, then we have Wilhelm Dilthey, Dilthey. Then we have Hans Georg Gadamer, then Paul Ricoeur. Then we have Edmund Husserl, Husserl, Husserl. Then we have Martin Heidegger. These are the famous philosophers and thinkers under this school of thought, hermeneutics, right? And the question is from E.D. Hirsch, Jr. So E.D. Hirsch, Jr., his celebrated work, Validity in Interpretation, right? So now if you go back to the question, options are from this school of thought, right? At least we have some familiarity with this. We might have cracked that question, right? So you can take this as an exercise. Why don't you find out the important works by these thinkers? We have Friedrich Schleiermacher or Wilhelm Dilthey, Hans Georg Gadamer, Paul Ricoeur. 4, they are exclusively associated with this school of thought, hermeneutics. The last 2, yes, they are also brought under this category, or sometimes they are associated with another school of thought called phenomenology. Phenomenology. So that is entirely another school of thought which focuses on perception, in the sense how individuals perceive this perceive reality or perceive this world. So each and every one of us has our own understanding of this reality, right? So if you focus on individual perception of reality, then that school of thought is called phenomenology. So when we say phenomenology, immediately these two critics or these two philosophers come to our mind: Erdmann Husserl and Martin Heidegger. So you can check out phenomenology and hermeneutics. Then let's go to the option under 49, option D, Terry Eagleton. As I told you before, Terry Eagleton is a Marxist, and this is his well-known work, Literary Theory and Introduction. So I have given the contents of this book on the slide. So you have introduction, as I told you before, what is literature? So this is his work. This is the opening of this book, Literary Theory and Introduction. Then we have chapter 1, the rise of English. Look at chapter 2, phenomenology, hermeneutics, reception theory. This is a very good essay in the sense he traces how theory evolved. So it started with phenomenology. I mean, individual perception of reality or world. Importance to how a particular individual understand the world. Next comes hermeneutics, all about interpretation, how someone interprets something. So focus is more on the interpreter or an individual, right? And we see the extension in reception theory. Reception theory is associated with reader response theory, how readers interpret literary text. Now you can see the connection: phenomenology, hermeneutics, reader response theory associated with reception theory. Reception theory is all about how a particular text is received across ages, across centuries. So that is reception theory, right? Again, reader plays a major role in this theory. So for reception, in order to understand reception theory or reader response theory, you should have some understanding of phenomenology and hermeneutics. So that's the previous question. And third chapter, structuralism and semiotics. Fourth, post-structuralism. Fifth, psychoanalysis. Conclusion, political criticism. As a Marxist, he insists on the importance of literature and its social commitment to society, right? So with this understanding, let's go to the last question of today's class. 50. Again, it's based on interpretation or kind of a general understanding. Which of the following statements best describes Terry Eagleton's views on literature? Fine. So I told you a clue, something with Marxism, right? Keep this in mind, then let's go. Option A, it is closely allied to religion in its significance and seriousness. Do you think literature is closely allied to only religion? So ask such questions. Then it is involved in the reproduction of the dominant social order. C, its primary purpose is to produce beauty and pleasure. Then its raison, a French word, raison d'être, is to reflect social reality directly. So if you think Terry Eagleton might have commented on the Marxist aspect of literature, then you can narrow down to two options. Either it is B or D. It is involved in the reproduction of the social, dominant social order, because there is always a class fight, right? So we have the owning class and the working class. So that is the predominant theme in any piece of work, Marxist work, right? They always focus on the clash between these two classes. Maybe that one, or simply reflect social reality directly. So what do you think is more close to Marxist philosophy? Then that should be the answer. So answer B, literature, it is involved in the reproduction of dominant social order, because sometimes literature also represents the elite social order. So Terry Eagleton was initially against literature and its purpose. Then he actually changed his point of view. He believed literature can also make an impact on the social order. Okay, so with this we finish today's class, but the lesson we learned through the analysis of these 5 questions, simple. You are expected to interpret certain texts or lines on the spot. So you have to be ready there. Don't be frightened. Don't get frightened. Just pay attention. Think of literature in general. That's how we solved all these questions today. Okay. So with this, we finish today's class. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow with another 5 questions. Thank you.